Hello, everyone. My name is Maureen Murat. I am with the University of New Hampshire School of Law, Blockchain, Cryptocurrency, and the Law program. And this course is called Tokenomics and Cryptocurrency Regulations. And today we're going to have a quick conversation with Ulta and Doni about cryptocurrencies, the craze, STO, maybe a little bit about what she thinks the SEC is up to, and things like that. But let's just get started. Ulta, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Maureen, for having me here. I'm an attorney by training. I'm a New York attorney, and I practice intellectual property and financial market compliance and getting more and more into blockchain and cryptocurrencies right now. I also teach at Chicago Kent College of Law for School of American Law. I teach courses in antitrust law, international business transactions, and I'm going to teach a course in international tech and cryptocurrency for the next semester. I also teach comparative law as well. So thank you for having me here for your course, and congratulations on your course.
Oh, well, thank you. I'd be interested to hear about the course you're going to teach, the cryptocurrency course. But we can talk about that afterwards.
Sure.
So in the last year, we've noticed that the crypto craze, as we affectionately call it, has died down a little bit, right? Or it's quieted down a little bit. Why do you think that is?
I agree with you. I think we've seen a lot of that, and we usually refer to that as going from crypto craze to a crypto crash. Honestly, I think that this crypto craze was stunning, was major, in my opinion. If I recall correctly, I think it was January 16th of 2018, and we usually refer to that as the Red Tuesday because the market was tracked with this Bitcoin tumbling down, if I'm not mistaken, below the $10,000 mark. And this was pretty much a 50% below its 2017 peak. At the same day, Ethereum and Ripple as well, they dropped more than 30 and 46% respectively in a single day. So definitely this was a huge market move. Obviously, cryptocurrency proponents, they refer to this mostly as a normal volatility. And even nowadays, they still think that this is a very much needed volatility when we talk about cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin. I think that it is good that we're seeing this crypto craze dying down, and I think it brings a little bit more of a realistic look or a more sober perspective for businesses and for the industry. And I'd like to mention here just a funny story. When I lectured in China in 2017, and I recall going out with my students for lunches or dinners, and I do hear from the senior citizens there mentioning Bitcoin and mostly Bitcoin, actually. Myself, I was familiar with Bitcoin, but I was not very much involved in this space at that time. So that was like a trend, like people kind of felt cooler just talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And you could hear a little bit more from millennials there. So to me, definitely this was a hype. This was a trend. It was just that. In regards to the reasons why we're seeing this crypto craze dying down, I think there's several reasons, but in my opinion, I think that some of them are mostly related to the understanding that people have about this industry, about this space. I do not think that people at the beginning, they were interested in participating or being part of this crypto craze just because of they were interested in investing in this invisible Bitcoin currency that was a decentralized currency that didn't have oversight from the government. I think they were just in it for return of their investments, right? I think they were buying high, they were hoping to sell higher at the same time. We did hear all sorts of stories about Bitcoin billionaires, and we heard stories about these overnight millionaires as well. And individual investors, they kind of flooded the space to be part of this Bitcoin hype. Another reason that I think was because of this, for this crypto craze to die down was that even the investing purpose that people were looking for this cryptocurrencies was mostly based on this stagnant economy. They were trying to invest to it was definitely a little bit guided or driven by greed as well. Or maybe it was even impacted by anger against their government. So lots of people joined late. And I think people who joined late, they probably lost more, in my opinion. Another reason probably was even the crypto mass adoption. I don't think that even as we speak right now, we do not have that crypto mass adoption that we're looking for.
Right.
And I think that knowledge of the knowledge level of this technology is another element that is factoring in. People still do not understand not only the purpose, but also how these cryptocurrencies work. So I would say, definitely we probably have more reasons, but I think these were the main reasons that are kind of impacting the crypto craze kind of dying down.
No, I agree. And I think part of it is that, granted, I don't think everyone who was part of that movement was trying to scam anybody, but I know that there was definitely a number of people who were. So I feel like that also because the number of scams have kind of gone down, hopefully, then
Exactly.
that helps as well. Yeah.
But I think at least the positive side of it is that when I think about the crypto craze, I think that is dying down, but we have this new trend. I think the blockchain trend kind of came out of that crypto craze. And I think people now are seeing a lot more potential in this technology. Not that they did not see that before, but I think this crypto hype kind of settled them down to see a little bit more clearly what is going on behind the technology, meaning blockchain.
Oh, yes. I think the craze definitely helped bring us to this point, right? Because I don't think people really cared about blockchain until you heard what cryptocurrencies were, and then to realize that that was a technology that was being used. And so it went on from there. So yes, I agree. I think it was the best way to kind of get people talking about it. Well, where do you see, and because you said there's this new trend about the blockchain technology, but there's also another trend with STO, security token offerings. And where do you see that, especially with your work in capital markets, where do you see that kind of fitting into the blockchain landscape?
That's a very, very good question, Maureen. So thank you for asking that. And first of all, maybe it's going to be a little bit helpful to your students. I'm sure they're familiar with security tokens and what security tokens are, but we have different definition, different definitions relating to the meaning, but people refer to security token offering in different ways. They're definitely this novel fundraising mechanism. And I think that they were kind of born from this increased regulatory oversight on the initial coin offerings, pretty much. And they are just digital securities that are essentially digitized upgrades to the traditional securities, meaning that now you have this digital security that simply replaces your paper stock certificate with a digital version of it, right? So I think that the ICO trend dying down in 2018, as I mentioned, opened the door to the STOs. And from what I have read so far, we're looking to a potential market for STOs for this year. I think is estimated to be probably around $24 trillion. And I think this is definitely this is going to have a huge impact in the marketplace as well. Some people also refer to the STOs just in those simple three words like Reg D, 506B, or 506C, and Regulation S. So we definitely have these different meanings. And I think as lawyers, I think we're very much more relieved when we hear the term SEO. I don't know about you, but every time I hear the term SEO, I feel a little bit more relieved, or when I work or when I represent clients. And I think probably it's the same for regulators as well. I think that they feel a little bit more at ease when they're asked to identify or when they're asked to clarify different procedures or regulations that are associated with security tokens. In regards to the applications, I think that probably the main application that we're seeing right now is probably tokenization of real estate. We're dealing with a crypto-based fractional ownership, etc. There are a lot of benefits with to security tokens as far as 24/7 trading, efficiency. I'm a little bit more worried about the liquidity right now because I think this is something that needs to be, I mean, we have to see a lot more later on how this is going to play for security tokens. But most of these security tokens are offered as private placement to accredited investors.
Right.
And majority of the blockchain startups that they started offering or planning utility token model, now they're moving towards STOs. Where do I see them fitting into blockchain landscape? I think that this depends a lot on the regulatory framework as well, because we still have a lot of issues. We still have a lot of issues that this blockchain companies are going to face or being faced with when it comes to using their tokens, these tokens on their platforms, right? I think that probably the registration as an alternative trading system, as an ADS, is going to be or needs a little bit more clarification, because I don't think that SEC has issued any clear guidance when it comes to regarding to the circumstances under which this blockchain platforms dealing with security tokens would be regarded as securities exchange, especially in those cases where these platforms probably they don't even call themselves as an exchange or any kind. So another issue, I'd say that the custody issue is a big issue to be dealing with in the future, and so we still need a lot more action in this direction. And another thing probably is even better education in order to better understand how security token offerings work or function. But I do see a lot of more initiatives going toward that. So I'm a little bit more optimistic toward the education side of in regards to the SEO.
Yeah, and I think in terms of it fitting into the blockchain landscape, like I'm with you where I think people feel a little bit better when you say STO, because at least you're admitting that what you're offering is not this just,
I
fluffy
agree.
thing. It is actually a financial instrument, an investment scheme, like something that has a category, that it fits somewhere that you can make it work. It's not this new revolutionary thing that has no boundaries. You know what I mean? So I do agree with you on that. Okay.
And I agree with you. And I think it's a little bit more helpful, as I said, not only for us as lawyers, but even to potential investors and issuers out there. At least there is a little bit more clear guidance on this front.
Right, exactly. Have you been following the SEC at all in terms of
Of
like
course.
things? Okay, because they're always putting stuff out, right? And I think one of the issues that I find, especially with the crypto media outlets, they often write, the title, it's clickbait, you click on it, and then it doesn't give you any information, right? Or they misread whatever an order that came out or a statement that someone made. They make it more definitive than what it is. And I've noticed that the SEC has been, I think, trying to be very careful about what they say and how they present things. So what do you
Yes,
think?
definitely very careful.
I'm sorry?
Definitely very careful, as
Yes.
we can see.
Yes. So what do you think the position of the SEC is going to be, going forward, now that we know they're paying attention?
I think they're definitely paying more attention.
Mhm.
And last year, I recall there was this sentiment in the space that SEC and CFTC as well, they're both going to go only after the big violators. But as we both know, for the SEC, no violation is too small to prosecute. So I don't think they're going only after the big violators. Maybe they're going only, for now, they're going against those obvious violators, but I think they're already going a little bit more toward enforcement actions. And I think the shutdown right now has impacted a lot of this, but we're hopefully going to see a lot of more enforcement coming up. From the SEC and CFTC, we have seen a lot of platforms being on their attention, especially during 2018. We did see several enforcements, and I just want to update a little bit your students about some enforcement that we did see in 2018. First of all, was November of 2018 that the SEC released this statement on digital asset securities issuance and trading, and explaining their motivation behind the recent actions that they undertook and setting kind of precedent for enforcement in 2019. I think they're more on an ICO prosecution mode right now, so to speak. And probably the AirFox, and I'm sure your students are going to familiarize themselves with these cases that were initiated in 2000, as far as enforcement action in 2018. A big case was the AirFox and Paragon. They were both two ICOs funded projects that I think they raised millions in late 2017. Right. They were both charged with illegally selling these securities and failing to register with the SEC. Both of them settled with the commission, I think was in November. So this enforcement action definitely were a vindication for those who warned that claims of utility token status, or pretty much promises of this future functionality, was like a defense against securities laws actions, right? If we recall from the Paragon and AirFox case, we should mention that both of them, they were ICOs that happened or occurred after the SEC issued or published the DAO report. I think was back on July 2017. And then we had another action from the SEC on November 8th, and this was the Ether Delta against the Ether Delta founder. I'm sure you recall that. There was like another big action against Zachary Coburn, I think was his name. And he was operating this unregistered national securities exchange. He settled with the SEC, and I'm not going to mention, but definitely he settled. Like, he also had like a disgorgement fee to pay and another penalty. Interestingly enough, the SEC again referred to the fact that most of this trading had occurred after the release of the DAO report. I think it's a positive sign that SEC is allowing at least these organizations to retroactively comply with the federal securities law. And of course, they have to settle and they have to agree on paying some fines. But in my opinion, as we have both seen, the majority of these fines are kind of a slap on the wrist for some of these organizations. I think we're having some guidance, even though Chairman Clayton, back in November 2018, he confirmed that his position when it comes to exchanges, he's looking for a platform that has to be registered as an exchange. So if you're facilitating this open public trading on securities and matching buyers and sellers, then you must be registered as an exchange. And we both know that so far, actually, we do not have any crypto exchanges currently appearing on that SEC's list of active national securities exchanges, right? It's likely that 2019 we're going to see a lot more enforcement coming up, and again, I think they're going to kind of address the initial coin offering, because I think 2017, 2018 was like a big mess, so they need a lot of work to kind of clear that mess. Something that probably is going to impact somehow this enforcement actions is going to be the SOL, and meaning that, the statute of limitation, because pretty much I think under Section 13 of the Act, unless this action is brought within 1 year after the discovery of this untrue statement, if I recall that correctly, or after the discovery should have been made by the exercise of this reasonable due diligence, I don't think they can bring the action after 1 year. So probably some of these ICOs, they are already safe, I have to say, but some of them definitely are going to see more action.
Right. And to your point, I think the low-hanging fruit that they've been, capturing has also kept the SEC very, very busy. They even created a section just for it, if you remember, because they needed the manpower. So some people, were able to slip through the cracks, fine. But I think they also made their move, and they made their position known by the ones they did capture. So
I agree.
yeah. So, but I guess we're still in the wait and see mode, right? To see what else will come out of it. I know that a few months ago, Congress sent a letter to the SEC chairman asking for more clarity regarding crypto regulations. And the chairman, he, had made it clear that he has no, at least not currently, no intention to update standards to include cryptos. And I know we see a lot on LinkedIn and some of these other social media platforms where everybody's like, the SEC needs to provide clarity, and it's like, well, what does that mean? What would you need to see for you to be like, okay, that's clear? So, what do you think clarity looks like? I know it's a big question.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
That's a big question. But I recall that letter. But it's interesting that I think that letter was sent back last year. But I do not recall Chairman Clayton. I mean, and I'm not referring to him like appearing at consensus meetings, etc., or conferences. But I don't think they ever officially responded to that letter. Correct?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
It wasn't in response to the letter. Sorry, I was just saying that he had made, in his talks, he was like, his position is he hadn't seen an ICO that wasn't offering a security, and he feels like the rules that we have now apply. So it doesn't seem like he was thinking of doing, creating rules just for cryptocurrencies. But yes,
that's for
that was up here. Yes, he did. And no, I don't think there was a response to the letter.
And I think something maybe positive that hopefully is going to happen. I'm sure you recall on November 2018 when the SEC issued the statement about coming up with a plain English guidance on security tokens. Mm-hmm. And they said that that's probably going to come out early in 2019. I mean, obviously, we're January 2019, so hopefully we're going to see that later on. I don't know how much plain English this guidance is going to be, but they're stating that under this plain English guide, the interested parties are going to be able to kind of figure out whether they're dealing with a security. I'm very excited, but I'm worried at the same time how plain English this guide is going to look. Another new development that we have is the Taxonomy Act, which was a bipartisan bill that was introduced to provide this much needed regulatory clarity in the space. But again, in order for that bill to go through, definitely, I mean, both houses, they have to approve, and that it has to be signed by president. So I don't know how much we're going to see in respect to that. If I were to look for clarity, I think I would refer to the latest guide that came out from the Financial Conduct Authority of the United Kingdom. And I'm sure you heard about that too. I think it's a very interesting, it's the recent guidance on crypto assets from the FCA, and they recognize the importance of issuing this guideline, and they also define those regulatory boundaries for crypto assets. From what I read so far, it looks like it's a very clear and helpful guidance. They concentrate mostly in the intrinsic characteristics of crypto assets, while SEC concentrates mostly on the extrinsic characteristics, right? So I don't know how that guidance, the FCA guidance, is going to impact the SEC, but I think I mean that's what we need pretty much right now: some more clarity from the SEC in order to be able for all the players in this industry to have a better understanding how to operate.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, I definitely think that makes total sense because I think part of it is being able to, at least, like you said, if they just use the FCA rulings that came out like recently, right? Because today is what, January 25th. So this week, that and especially because some of the rules are similar anyway, in terms of, like, let's say outside of cryptocurrency, a lot of our rules are similar anyway. So it would make sense to at least take a look to see what the UK is doing. But I also want to make clear
Exactly.
that if you're not in the UK, you're not you don't have a business in the UK, et cetera, then, wherever you are, those rules still apply. So if you're in the US,
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. You have,
it hasn't changed. And
hasn't changed at all. True.
yeah, and I think there was a lot of talk about, what would be the best place to start your crypto business, et cetera. And, at the end of the day, even if you had your business somewhere else, there are so many things to consider outside of, whether or not that region was a cryptocurrency friendly region, that, it may or may not be worth it. Like, definitely have to do due diligence and do your research on that.
I agree.
Yeah. So one thing that we do talk to our students about are tokens that are either a security and a non-security. You mentioned earlier utility tokens. And generally, when someone says a utility token, what they're really trying to say is that their token is not a security. But as we've seen, it doesn't really matter what you call it. It's based on, the facts and circumstances, to use a legal term, around how you use this particular token. So do you think, or do you believe a token can both be a security and a non-security, or you think it can only be one thing at a time? But it can change characteristic, if that makes sense.
I think this is a very philosophical question.
Okay.
I always refer to this as a philosophical question because my answer is it depends. It depends on the characteristics of that token. And it depends on which characteristic is more prominent. Like, you can have a token that has some of their security side and they have some utility side as well. But if you are dealing with an object where there is a clear explanation, especially when it comes to profit and that profit being delivered by the efforts of the other, we both know that here this is a clear case of dealing with the security. But does any token that exists, does any token exist that is not a non-security? I think so far we know, even SEC has stated, that doesn't appear to have encountered one, right? We haven't seen any token that is not a security. They think that, and they believe that every ICO that they have seen is a security. But in my opinion, yes, you can have a token being both a security and non-security. It depends. Again, it depends on what prominent side of the token is being utilized at that particular platform.
Right, and I agree with you. I think what's a main driver of determining whether something's a security or not is how you use it, right? And the fact that a utility token is limited if it doesn't have a community or an ecosystem to be used in. So I find it very difficult to call something a utility token that has nowhere, like, where you can't use it anywhere.
Use it, yeah.
At least not yet, right? Because that's the whole point of a lot of these token and coin offerings, right? Is to raise money so that
exactly
you can create this platform. So yeah, I agree with you. So last question, I won't keep you any much longer. So we were talking about how these tokens, depending on what they are, whether we consider them a security or not security. And we've also been hearing a lot about digital tokens being like an asset class, etc. And I know you've also done at least a little bit of work or research with the CFTC and how that has how, because they have a role in this as well, right? We also talk about the CFTC's position in this course. So, what do you, given that the digital tokens world is expanding, right? Where do you see it going? Given that the SEC and the CFTC have not figured out how to classify them, and I'll caveat that because I think I'm not going to say that they haven't determined that Bitcoin and Ethereum, at least the SEC says those two are not securities, right? But then the CFTC is like, well, Bitcoin is a commodity and coins like it are commodities. So where do you think that kind of fits in this digital token world? Because I'm assuming people are thinking that they could make their digital tokens mirror, you know, the ones that the SEC or the CFTC have kind of said, okay, that's not a security.
And I agree with you. I think that it's interesting for all these regulators. As we know, they try to define these currencies under a term that kind of fits better into their jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. And the problem with asking these regulators to clarify crypto as one thing or another is that crypto actually can be anything, right? You can code it in different ways. You can govern it that in different ways. And there unlimited sort of permutation probably that we cannot fit those in a single bucket. But I think another issue is that we have also 50 states that they have their own laws, they have their own ideas and opinions. So our regulatory landscape right now is very complicated. It's kind of challenging, actually. And we have several issues that this industry is facing, because if we're talking about how this marketplace of digital tokens is going to expand, you have to consider a lot of other issues. And one of them is even the KYC and AML is complicated. It's very costly to perform both KYC and AML, to do those in several places. So the question from several other academics and myself right now is, do we think we can have this harmonization in not only between countries, but even here in the United States, if we can have this sort of harmonization when it comes to this regulatory framework? And I don't think so, because in order to have this harmonization, you have to recognize the differences. And those differences, especially in between countries, they quite pronunciated, right? In order for these SEOs to be compliant, they need to comply with different security laws. And we're still facing a lot of these regulatory and even technological challenges, actually.
Right.
And therefore, I just hope that this is not going to stop the hype that we're facing right now when it comes to SEOs, because definitely it's a strong and potential marketplace. So we want for this marketplace to be able to grow, but also while staying compliant at the same time.
Right. And for people to know that's the route you should take. You should want to be in compliance. And I know there's, we have these extremes in terms of what, if it's not a specific rule that speaks to it, then it doesn't exist. And I feel like, to your point, I think we have to be mindful of how all these things affect the market. You were talking about how the market was gravely affected earlier this year and even late last year.
Yes.
So it's just all of this, is kind of intertwined. So we have to be mindful about all the different pieces, and not just the SEC and the CFTC, but other regulatory bodies too, But anyway, is there anything else you'd like to share with us that we didn't capture in our conversation?
This was a great interview. Thank you so much again for having me. But I don't know. I'm very excited about the space. So, and your students should be too, and my students as well. So they're lucky to be able to learn a lot about this technology. I think is amazing to me, especially. It's amazing to see the acceleration of the change. Right? We have all this technologies. We have blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and we're talking about artificial intelligence, quantum computing. And I think if we're able to understand and rely on the synergy in between all of these technologies, we're definitely going to come up with something even greater on a technology and innovative level. So I think the impact of distributed ledger technology may be even greater than any of us kind of realizes right now. So yes, I'm optimistic, and I'm very happy to be able to learn and share more knowledge in this space. So thank you again for having me, and I wish you the best of luck for this course.
Yes, thank you again for taking the time to chat with us. And obviously, if we can chat again. It was great meeting you. We finally met in person was it last month? It was last month. Yes.
It was last month, yes.
So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. And I mean, if anyone has any questions for you, how can they reach you? Can they reach you online? Do you have a Twitter page, or is LinkedIn the best way?
Uh, yes, I do. I am on Twitter, Olta Indoni Esquire, and I'm also on LinkedIn under, again, my name, Olta Indoni. So they can reach me. I also have my own podcast
Yes.
that we usually have. Yeah, the Cryptolo podcast, and is on iTunes and other several platforms. But definitely, yeah, I'd be open to have to receive all the questions that your students might have.
Okay, perfect. Thank you again, Alta. I really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Maureen.
Bye.